What is up, everybody? I am back with another episode of the podcast after quite a long break, but today's guest is a great one. I think you guys are going to enjoy this. We're speaking with Android, who is a former CSGO professional player who then transitioned into Valorant. He's been playing professional games as a career since 2015, playing for teams like Complexity, Envy, ANDBOX and NRG, and he is now a student playing collegiate Valorant as he studies psychology. And he has done a great deal of work sort of trying to understand the competitive mindset as a professional esports player. And so I wanted to talk to him about everything that has to do with sort of the mindset of a pro and how to get better as a competitor mentally in addition to just playing in the game. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation. We talk about all sorts of stuff with mental health and how to get better as a professional esports player. So let me know what you think of the conversation in the comments below, and let's get into the convo. So I'm here with Android, and we're going to be talking about a bunch of interesting topics related to Valorant and gaming, esports performance, that kind of stuff. And I wanted to start you off with just a question about sort of the transition that you made, because obviously you started out your esports career in Counter Strike, and then I believe you started in 2015, and so then you switched over to Valorant kind of like when that game came out. That's a pretty huge switch to like go from one game for 6 years basically of real professional grinding into a completely different game. What was that transition like? How hard was it to actually pick up a brand new game?
Oh man, yeah, that was very difficult. Like leaving the game that I like truly absolutely loved to play. I mean, during the time, it didn't feel. It felt like the only decision. I had to make that decision because Valve. Like what happened was Valve wasn't really taking care of the game and the scene. The NA scene was dying. Orgs were leaving. Everyone was going to Valorant. So yeah, that decision. I actually tried to stay in Counter Strike for the first 2 months after Valorant came out. Like I tried to give it like one last go, but eventually I knew there was no more money in it, and it seemed like anyone to stay in Counter Strike, their career would just die.
Mm-hmm.
So it was definitely hard to just force myself to switch over to Valorant. I mean I didn't mind it that much because it was new and Counter Strike like having the same map pool for so long and it kind of getting stale. Like I didn't really mind it that much, but it was definitely a worry. Like I definitely thought my career was like completely over for a while because I tried to. It was funny. I transitioned to Valorant, and I was terrible at the game. Like for the first like 2 months, 3 months, I couldn't even like shoot anybody. It was very concerning. But after a while, I got the hang of it, and I joined ANDBOX with
Mm-hmm.
Yaster, the legend now. He's doing well for himself. I miss that guy, but and then yeah, just kind of went well with that, but it kind of worked out. And then yeah, it was definitely
Yeah.
hard though. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I come from a sports background, and so I played a lot of sports growing up, and I've also played obviously a lot of video games. And every time I have to switch, one interest, it's always the mechanical side of things always takes a while, and obviously then there's sort of a mental strategy side of things that you have to kind of reframe for a new game. But I also find that a lot of skills do carry over, at least like sort of like the base way that you interpret like the challenge of like basically because all video games are like a problem solving challenge at the end of the day. There's pointing and clicking, that kind of thing, but you have to sort of like break down how to win a game, which is essentially just like a creative problem solving challenge. So what sort of skills were you able to like bring over from that kind of long Counter-Strike career?
Yeah, I definitely think Counter Strike players had the biggest advantage rather than Fortnite and pretty much Apex, like any other game, because yeah, I mean it's the same mechanics as Counter Strike, pretty much. Like you need to trade your teammates, you need to play off each other, you need to have good communication skills. It's a 5v5 search and like destroy, yeah, search and destroy. And I mean, the communication, the teamwork, like you pretty much play the game the same as Counter Strike, but the only difference is, yeah, you got to learn your individual agent, which is the learning curve. But all the mechanical like fundamentals, like we already had, so it's
Mm-hmm.
definitely made the transition a lot easier. And every pro mentioned that, like if you're Counter Strike, if you have a Counter Strike background, it's much easier. And I saw a lot of other like players with different backgrounds struggle with learning all like the new mechanics that like makes you a good player.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's all about like I look at the game as like chess. Like you want to make the best play at all times, and you want to be able to trade your teammates at all times, just like protecting your chess piece. And I mean, a lot of the same mechanics is just was exactly the same. So it was pretty easy to have the communication and um, the fundamentals. The only learning curve was really yeah, learning every single agent, what they do, and pretty much Valorant is a game of not getting destroyed by utility.
Yeah, totally.
Like like you have to position yourself so you're not dying for free, and that's how I look at it. I like that's my frame of mind. Like every round where I just die for free, like, hey, like what happened? What do I got to do? Like, okay, they have a breach, they have the ult, so you got to keep track of everything. You got to keep track. You got to keep track of your positioning, and it's a lot less forgiving than Counter Strike. I'd say Counter Strike, no matter what scenario you're in, you could make a good like the best of it. Like you have a smoke that you can put down, but if you're in the wrong position in Valorant, you're just dead. You can't
Yeah,
do
totally.
anything. So that I mean that's like the most frustrating part of Valorant too.
Sure. Yeah,
About
that makes
that.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to actually go back in time a little bit. It sounds weird to refer to you as sort of like a veteran. Maybe you're only
Oh, it's
in your
okay.
20s, but
I'm old. I'm old. I get it.
well, I'm in my 30s, so that makes me feel even
Well,
worse.
I'm
But
old. I'm old in the esport. I mean,
totally.
yeah, 20. I get it.
Totally. But yeah, I wanted to go back to kind of like your early days as a Counter Strike pro, and sort of like what was it like trying to make it onto a pro team? Because I feel like there's so many people who kind of look at gaming as like, oh, it'd be so cool to go pro, playing video games for a living, but they don't really understand what it actually takes to get there. Obviously, you have to be good at the game, but it's not just like mechanically skilled. You have to kind of there's a lot of other sort of factors that go into actually becoming a professional gamer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my whole story. I mean, first of all, like I've been obsessed with video games since I was like 10. And like I realized what I could actually go pro and like I would only play like 1.6 and screw around in that game. And then eventually Go came out and I didn't even know about ESCA. And so I started on ESCA and the first couple of months I got like really good RWS. Like I was playing pickup games and like I was doing really well and even destroying some pros and so yeah, so that's like where it gets tricky. So you know you're good, you know that you have the potential to go pro, and so how do you get onto? And a lot of I mean the biggest thing is not having a victim mentality. Like it's all about marketing, it's all about who you know, and I guess that does play into it, but skill speaks for itself. And so I was kind of toxic to be honest, like in ESCA. I joined a couple IM teams, main teams, premier teams, and I always like it was never good enough for me. Like I always thought like I should be on like a better level,
Hmm.
and so I always had that self-defeating attitude, and I wouldn't, which I regret. But anyway, I got cut from a lot of those teams, by the way, and then and then so I was like, screw this. I need a different approach. And so what I did was I created my own team.
Okay.
I created my own team with the guys that I know I will get along with. And so I basically just found a bunch of like four other guys who had really good RWS and pug stats. And then I
And
don't know if you know this, so like
RWS
the pug
is
guys.
sorry, RWS is what for the people who don't know.
Yeah, okay. It's a round win share. It's basically how much you contribute in a round that you win. So
Oh,
if you
okay.
get like 4 kills, you'll get like 80% RWS. If you get
Oh, okay,
zero kills,
gotcha.
you get zero RWS. And yeah, so if you get a lot of kills in a game, then the stats that are displayed on your profile will be higher. Like if you
Okay,
do
so it's basically
perform
like
well.
your impact on a round on
Yeah,
winning it. Okay,
exactly.
sure. So
Exactly.
it's
So if you're like a pug demon just holding W and owning everyone, you're gonna have a high. So I basically found four other pug demons and we played open together, like the lowest. So in ESCA, there's open, intermediate, main, premier, and then the pro level. which is great. I wish Valorant had something like that because in Valorant, if you asked me to go pro, how different story. But so we started in open and we immediately went like 28 and 0 in that. So we
Okay.
basically I proved myself in open. Then we're supposed to go to main. If you win open, you go to main, but a premier team picked us up. And then we did really well in that. We got like top four and we went to LAN and then like after we went to LAN, I basically proved myself and that's when like complexity actually you guys know him as Sentinel Death, like that guy reached out to me to join complexity. But I basically paved the path for myself. I never gave up. Like after getting cut from so many teams, and actually, I guess the people don't know, alias used to be Rabbit before, and people thought I was actually a cheater. Because it's funny. Back then, there's a guy named Hitman, and he actually got banned for cheating and overturned an entire pro season, and so everyone was skeptical of cheaters. And so for like a year or two, like I couldn't even get on a team because they thought I was cheating. And
Because your aim
like
was
it
too
just
good.
yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
had a lot of people were skeptical, like, unless you're land proven back then, you
Hmm.
pretty much didn't get a chance, and so, yeah, I never, like I just kept like, it was I knew I could go pro, and I knew my self-value at the time, so I just kept trying at new things, kept trying, and, I mean, the biggest thing is to not give up and keep on keeping a positive attitude and really learn from your mistakes instead of like, I think what a lot of people do, instead of learning from their mistakes, they just brush it off like, "Oh, I just got unlucky," or like they always blame something that doesn't help them. So
Hmm.
I think, yeah. So I mean, I after I made my own team, I basically that's how I got my chance, and then I was on complexity.
Oh, crazy. So you actually essentially just like brute forced your way in. It was just like, all right, undeniable. I just beat everybody, and therefore, that's
Yeah,
sort of like the proof is in the pudding. So yeah, that's definitely probably the most surefire way to get noticed is by literally just beating everybody around you. So
I
it
mean,
makes sense.
I should have been on pro teams before. Like pro teams were gonna pick me up, but then like word got I might be a cheater, and then
Mm,
like it was pretty defeating. So, but I mean, you just got to keep trying. Like I don't,
yeah,
that's like anything that's difficult, you got to just keep trying. And but like having the right mentality is like pretty big, I would say.
yeah,
So
100%. So I guess during that time, as you're sort of like building this team and building yourself as a player, what sort of things are you focusing on to get better specifically? I mean, obviously you're playing the game a ton, but did you have some sort of approach of like I'm going to work on these skills, or I'm just going to try and develop this part of my game, or was it just kind of like I'm just playing the game a lot and then just kind of by osmosis getting better at everything?
yeah, like I didn't think I would ever go pro, and especially like at my age or like our age, our age, like pro gaming wasn't even a thing when I
Yeah.
got good at video games. It was, it was a mindset from like being a young, like a perfectionist kind of mindset where like that's the only way to get really good at stuff when you're obsessed over like the small details. And I didn't even realize I was really doing that, but like I just wanted to get better. And so yeah, I would hyper focus on my mistakes and like I would anytime I like got fragged by someone, I would think like, how could I have done that better? How could I have taken that fight better? But like no matter what happens, I'll be like obsessed over like the small details, and I think that really like adds up when you keep on like hyper analyzing your gameplay.
Hmm.
But I that comes with a price. So it's like I just made a tweet actually, if you want to talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. If you want
Like I
to
just
bring
made
it
a
up.
tweet saying uh all right, yeah, I mean I can read it. Like and it's basically what I'm dealing with now, like pretty much the aftermath of like this mentality. And it's I've always thought the path to becoming the best is something was to constantly fixate on the negatives, asking questions like what could I do better all the time. The mindset's made me feel never good enough no matter what I do. It has led me to self sabotage anything good in my life. I'm just glad I finally realized at 28 that I got to change his mindset. And then I said because I believe that cognitive behavioral therapy like kind of specializes on negative thinking.
Hmm.
And so and so like I don't know, I tweeted that out because when you constantly fixate on the negatives, it tends to not just be in the game. Like you kind of find something wrong with like just I mean I'm just speaking from personal experience. Like this, you could have so many good things in your life, but you're just constantly thinking of like the negatives, and
Mhm.
I don't. And it's not good. It's not good after a while. And there were people commenting saying like, well, it's good to like look at your mistakes and everything, but like obsess over it, like um, you got to just find the balance. But yeah, that's how I basically got good at video games to begin with. But it gave me a lot of anxiety, and it like because people are saying like, yeah, it got you to where you are, right? So like, how could you argue with that mindset? But like, if I could go back, I would have helped like myself not think so negatively to the
Sure.
point where I'm like constantly anxious 24/7. So I mean, that's a good mentality. Just keep on fixating on your mistakes, and
But do it
also you
in a
don't want to
healthy way for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you don't want to get stuck on like fixating on the same mistakes over and over and over again. I think a lot of people do that.
Mhm.
Um, So, but yeah, I mean, just to answer your question, like I didn't really, I just love video games, you know, and
Sure.
like it's not like I knew I could do it for a living. I don't know, I just somehow got really good at it from just like loving to win, I guess. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I can
I guess.
relate to that just from my sports and also my video game stuff. Like I've always wanted to just be really good at things. And I can also totally relate. I mean, I guess I should give a little bit of background. I reached out to you to be a guest on this because I've followed like a ton of pro players in Valorant just because I started out doing content and casting, and I was like I casted a bunch of your games and like First Strike back in 2020.
Oh, really?
And so I've just kind of been interested in following people in the scene, and I noticed that you were putting out a lot of sort of like really personal sort of growth things that you're contemplating and dealing with. And that's pretty rare in the space. You know, a lot of people on social media will just put out only the positive things that they're experiencing. And I think it's pretty admirable to be willing to open yourself up to just kind of like speaking what your actual experience is. And it really resonated with me because I've gone through the same type of things, you know, like how do you know if you're good when you're only focusing on these mistakes that you're making? Like you could be winning and still feel bad because you didn't do something perfect, and there is sort of elements of perfectionism that lead you to become excellent at things, but also lots of elements of perfection that lead you to never being happy despite having success. So
Um,
I can totally relate to that. And it's interesting now that you find yourself going into um, are you actually, because so I guess this is sort of a long-winded transition to talking about what you're doing now. So you played in CS:GO, you transitioned to Valorant, you played for ANDBOX, then went to NRG, and now have esport. I'm just gonna call it an esports retirement because in esports we see a lot of these like people retire from esports and then you know they get the itch and they come back. So we'll see. Maybe we'll see you in pro Valorant at some point. But essentially,
great.
you've retired from pro Valorant. You've enrolled in university, but you are playing Valorant still for their collegiate team, correct?
Yeah. And yeah, and then this is what I love too, because yeah, I'm studying psychology,
Okay, so
and
you
I'm
are
still
studying psychology. I was
yeah,
going to try and get to that. So you're
yeah.
actually
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
all of this
yeah.
interest in sort of like how to think about the game and how to get better and dealing with the pressure has led you to be interested in the psychology behind that, which is now what you're studying.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. Tell me what it's like to kind of have maybe like a deeper frame of reference for the things that you've experienced. Maybe now that you're actually studying like the processes of that.
I mean, I could give you the background how I felt on like the teams and like the anxiety I had during the matches and like why I want to like even go into psychology.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that sounds great. I think performance anxiety, people even have that in ranked. Like ranked anxiety is a real thing. So it's
Yeah,
only, you know, 20, 30 fold when you have actual stakes and money on the line, I'm sure.
yeah. Like I mean, first of all, I'll say a lot of anxiety like stems from just being indoors all all day and not
Mhm.
getting sunlight, and like that kind of makes you anxious. And I mean, you see a lot of gamers, even pros, like getting pissed off all the time, and like everyone's like super irritable. And pretty much after I got benched from NRG, I like took a deep look at myself, and it was just I obsessed over like gaming my entire life, and I didn't make that many meaningful friendships. I didn't talk to that many people. Like I was pretty like selfish with everything, and like I'm sitting there after like I just questioned like I guess what was it all for, and
Mhm.
I felt really socially awkward, and like I was playing ranked a couple times, and I was just playing ranked ever. I didn't like how I talked to people either. Like I knew I was just had so much like hatred and like a lot of issues built up, and I think a lot of that stemmed up from not being able to communicate properly. And I think that's lot of issues. I would say that's if I had to say the number one issue on every single team is communication issues. Like a lot of gamers, even the staff, like don't know how to communicate that well with each other because
Mhm.
the gamers don't really know how to communicate from being indoors a lot of the time. And I think that leads to a lot of like misunderstanding and anger when you're not really sure how to like communicate. And I just knew I had a lot of issues I had to solve, I suppose. And the anxiety, yeah, I'll tell you, like on on NRG, if you're familiar with like the map Breeze, so we're in a tournament.
Mhm.
Very first round, I I'm outside A and I go onto this platform outside of A site. We're P side on Breeze,
Mhm.
hacker side. And so I'm sitting there and the round starts. I'm chamber. I put alarm bot in the cave to the right of me. There's another entrance that enemies can come from.
Mhm.
And someone triggers my alarm bot just for a second. And if the alarm bot actually goes off, it'll say on your screen that the alarm bot went off. But I just heard it for a second. So that would indicate that someone's triggered it for a second and then might have smoked it or whatever. And I remember I didn't like catch that at the start, and like so that and then by the time I realized like 3 seconds later, like I'm like, oh crap, like someone's probably flanking me. Like I just died to the back, and I'm like, and so that simple thing that happened right there, I started questioning like, oh my god, like are you not in it today? How did you not know that? Like, are you dumb? Like, what is going on? Like are you maybe this is a bad day? Like oh you got to play good. Like so all these thoughts start flooding in, and man,
Mm.
like if you don't know how to reset from stuff like that, like the next round, like I'm still in my own head, and now I'm thinking like, oh man, you gotta like are you still in your own head? Like you gotta put like have a good round now. And then like another round, and then I lose like a dumb like battle 1v1. It's like, oh my god, like yep, you're and then so that game I ended with like 5 kills, and I like played like awful, and I didn't know how to reset mentally. And and that's just one example. Another example would be like, I remember there was another game on NRG. I had a, it was like the score was like 10-9, and I knew I had if we won this game, I would have to do the interview after the game in front of like hundreds of thousands of people. And my like I don't even this is like a year ago, so I've already competed for like 6 years, and for some reason I never like got a hold of any of these mental like problems that I've had. But we started to come back. Like I guess we're down like 10-8, and then we said 10-10, and then we started winning 11-10. I'm like, oh my god, I might have to do this
And
interview
you're thinking about the interview in the middle of a game.
instead of the game. Instead
Oh
of the
my god.
game, I was thinking of this interview, and then we ended up losing. It was like it's pathetic. Like instead of like I I thought about that a lot. Like instead of like being bad about the losses, like oh, kind of like a relief.
Wow.
But and then so like the social anxiety like that, like there's so many things that you need to get a hold of outside of the game. But I only fixate on stuff inside the game. That's kind of like the message I'm trying to get to people to realize like it's a whole nother game, the mental game, and no one talks about that. And if you don't, and I had the mentality of oh, next tournament I'll play better. Like the nerves won't be there because like the more you do it, the less
Mm.
anxious you might become. But it never happened. It never happened like that. And so I always dealt with that kind of anxiety, and I've always put too much pressure on myself too. Like if I played on ANDBOX, I had no anxiety. I was just, whatever. I was just like the best player on that team, I guess. And I thought that, and then on NRG, oh, I'm starting to play with better players, and the pressure's more on. Like, and then
Mhm.
I would put that pressure on myself, and then I'd play like awful. Like instead of just playing, I'd be questioning, like in my own head, like is this the right play? Is this the right play? Am I doing the right thing? Am I I gotta play good. Like, and so there's like, and I've talked, and the thing is, I've talked to many sports psychologists over my career, and for some reason, like, well, none of them could help me because none of them can relate. They always gave me like football analogies,
Mm,
soccer analogies, and it's just like, man, like you can't listen to this guy. And so so basically, I'm on a journey, and this is recent. Like, this is I actually tweeted out after I got benched from NRG, like, man, this is a blessing in disguise because I was at the point where like I knew I always thought like my life would almost be over if I didn't become the best player. And as I started to realize I was like getting in my own head and I couldn't compete anymore, it was like, like you have the extra pressure of like I'm not like this is what I've been doing my entire life. Like what's next? And
mm,
after I got up from energy, actually, it was kind of like a blessing. This guy actually tweeted that because then I took all the pressure off me and I knew I needed to like do something else. And that's when I like started to read like this is where my fascination came from because man, I've been doing this for 7 years. Some reason, and with all these mental blocks, I'm still like playing at a pretty good level. And like
mm,
so at the back of my mind, it's like, oh, now that I feel kind of better, I wonder how I'd play. But I'm obsessed with all like this topic, and I actually tweeted out not too long ago. It was a month ago about the stuff I was feeling and the mental blocks that people might have, like obsessing over changing your settings or your mouse, or
mm.
like constantly finding excuses. Because I had that problem too. Like I'd constantly change my settings all the time and be in my own head all the time.
What's that
And so
crosshair? That's the one that's gonna work for me this time, right?
yeah, no, it's ridiculous. And you know what happened though? Like it was a Counter Strike, and this screwed my mental forever. I'll tell you about it. Like I I, uh, I was playing a Counter Strike map. It was like Inferno, and the first half of the game I played awful. I had like 3 kills. We switch halves, and I'm like, man, like what's going on? And my brain goes to, I'm going to change my mouse. No, I didn't change my mouse. I changed my sense and my resolution
Oh
from
my
like
god.
native 1920 to like stretched. And I changed my sense, and I ended the game with like 30 kills. That
Wow.
half I just, and so man, that you don't want to go on that path because now my brain's like, oh, Brad, you're playing bad. I don't know. Maybe you should change something. And
Right. It becomes
the
like a
feeling
magic
never,
bullet for you.
it doesn't go away if you start that, and it's so hard to get rid of that habit. So you got to like you trick your brain to other things, and actually, so I still do that actually. So now I'm on the path to kind of discover like how do I really like fix myself, and that's where it's interesting that I'm still playing collegiate, so I can start to fix myself in a better environment, less competitive, and learn about psychology and ask professors. So like I'm kind of fixing myself while applying it in real time. And so, and then and when I made that tweet about mental blocks, I got messaged by like 80 people saying, dude, like I'm struggling with this. I need help with this too. And there's a lot of people like that. And
Yeah.
it was like, yeah. So
I,
yeah,
I
that's the
wanted to
best
go to
feeling.
that point actually because I
Yeah.
mean I feel like most people when they're dealing with this they just assume that like they're the problem, but in reality
Exactly.
like mental health is like it's ubiquitous. Everybody has these issues, and it's so funny that you're telling me
Mhm.
this story about like thinking in the future about this interview and like the pressure gets
Oh
ramped
yeah.
up as you get signed to a bigger team with more stakes. And I mean, I can relate like 100% because and it's such a like a random personal story, but when I was playing college baseball, I went to college for the sole purpose of playing baseball because I was like, how do I get into a pro team? I got to go to a college team first so I can maybe get drafted. So I found some college that I thought I could make the team for. I wasn't recruited. Like I walked onto the team. I played a season. Was like okay, not that great. Trained super hard for my next year. Came into like the fall training season before the season actually started. Was having a really good like practice season. The coaches were like, yeah, like you're probably gonna make varsity this year. And then we had like one more practice before going to Florida to play against all these other teams for like the winter season. And I asked my coach, I was like, hey, I'm trying to make travel plans, whether I need to go home and see my parents for the winter or am I going to come travel with you guys. And they're like, well, we'll see. We'll let you know as soon as possible. Like, just have one more good practice. I went into that last practice with just like so much pressure, and I had like the worst practice that I'd had my entire college career. Coaches
Yeah.
never talked to me again for the rest. And that was like literally the end of my baseball career. And it was just like one
No.
of those things
Yeah.
where you just build up this one goal that you're so fixated on and you just can't get it out of your head to the point
Yeah.
where you're like not even in the present. You're just like in the future, which makes it impossible to actually perform correctly. And
Oh yeah.
I mean, I see you nodding
I
your
love
head
that story.
like everybody has these experiences.
I
Um,
love that story. Yeah.
and I have this friend that I met several years ago who was a professional baseball player, and he had a similar experience where he was on a professional team and they were playing in the World Series, which is the championship for baseball. It's like literally the biggest stakes possible. Um, and he played incredible, and they won the World Series, and he was like one of the heroes that won the World Series. And then a year later, he was out of the majors because he couldn't replicate the performance. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and he literally has spent the last like 30 years since then trying to figure out like what happened, and now he like helps other athletes like train themselves to become like able to get into the zone. But I had a lot of conversations with him about this where it's like you essentially the best performance you can have is when you're fully present in the moment, right? Because there's no distractions and you kind of
Yeah.
let your instincts and your muscle memory take over. But if you're ever thinking in the past or you're thinking in the future, it's impossible to be in the present, right? And it's so easy
Exactly.
to get into the future or get into the past because of a mistake or because of an anxiety. And so it's really just finding that like middle ground where you're able to allow yourself to basically like unleash the skills that you have. And so many people struggle with that. So I just want to say that
Yeah.
because like you're not
Yeah.
alone, and everybody else listening to this, you're not alone. Like this is just human experience basically of trying to
Uh,
compete.
yeah, I love that because like I mean I love that. Not I mean I'm sorry about what happened in your practice,
It
but
is what it
but
is,
like
you know.
I mean relatable. Like every big shot I had to yeah I mean that's relatable. Like every time I had a big shot to like really prove myself with a lot of people, like I'd tell myself before the game like yo this is your time to like prove yourself, and those words like I don't know like that you put extra pressure on yourself and it just spirals. And I mean the way I see it, like yeah you want to be in flow state, and anything other than like if you couldn't be thinking of anything, and if you're in your own head about anything you go from playing 100% and you start thinking of other things, your factors go to 80%, then 70%, then 50%, then it just spirals out of control because you're not really sure what's going on.
Right, you're
And
focusing
no one
on
really
on
talks about
on
it.
playing poorly, and that just makes it even
Yeah,
worse, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And no one really talks about this, like you said, like yeah, and like people talk about like aim labs and like all these other things. And I mean, you've got players like tens changing their mouse every 3 seconds, so it's like almost supported. This like mindset's like supported, but like so now like how I'm trying to fix this mentality. I first of all I play the game and I write down every single thing that like triggers me, and like and then so you gotta like go within first of all, like if other team like a lot of people blame other teammates or oh this guy made a mistake and so I'm getting pissed off. And you gotta understand that like it's not him that's like pissing you off. Like like everything comes from within, and you gotta like figure that out first of all. Like why is this guy pissing you off? Like why is like and you gotta frame your mind where okay if I'm getting affected by anything else, I'm not gonna be in that flow state 100%. If I'm like and so you gotta like fully first of all understand that, because if you don't understand that getting tilted at other things like your gameplay or other people affects you and your performance, then you're never gonna get better. And so I would write down all those. And so just writing them down, first of all, helps tremendously because now you're aware of it. Because if you're
Hmm.
not, yeah, like I said, if you're not aware of it, you can't fix it. And I would journal. And some of the things I would write it down, and I would try to like just have conversations with myself, kind of like self therapy. And I just start like trying to understand like why I'm like this is frustrating me so much. I mean, the biggest thing that helped me was just understanding like, hey, if this guy make a mistake is gonna make me play worse, like obviously that's a problem. Like you can't, and you see it in rank time and time again, like, oh, this guy's like playing bad. But there's always something you can be doing better. You should never, ever play the victim mindset. And that's how you never get better. That's why you'll stay the same player forever. You're constantly outside factors. No, no. Focus on yourself always. What can you
Hmm.
do better? What can you do better? What can you do better? and then you'll see like the results. Uh, yeah, to the results, but you gotta. And also, I've been experimenting with different grounding techniques. Like if someone actually is pissing me off, and if I don't know how to reset, then that's an issue too. So you got to like practice being able to. And ranked is like a great way to do that because
Like
everything pisses you
training
off in
grounds, yeah.
ranked. Yeah, everything pisses. Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's why I think I'm starting to enjoy ranked because it's interesting. Because it's almost like going to the gym too when your mental gets better. Like you start seeing results with your muscles in the gym, and like with your mental, you'll start the things that used to bug you don't anymore, and
Mhm.
that's like very rewarding. You're like, wow, like a couple weeks ago this would have pissed me off, but like I'm chill now, and like and then you'll realize you'll play a lot better. And so, yeah, you journal, write down all your issues, and then you try to talk away, and then, yeah, just start working on it like that. And yeah, not really talked about. No one's ever told me that. I wish I worked on my mental, which I've even read books like Inner Game of Tennis,
Mhm.
Poker Game,
The
what's
Jared
it?
Tendler book.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Jared
yeah.
Tedler book. I read a lot of these, and I don't know. For some reason, none of them like helped me.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't mean I couldn't understand it. Like I don't know. Yeah,
yeah, I think a lot of people like have
go ahead.
tried to talk about it, and some people can talk about it from their own specific field, but oftentimes like you can hear the same information from like 20 different people, and it just has to be from like one person that says it the way that
Yeah.
speaks to you before it actually sinks in. I wanted to kind of
Mhm.
like switch gears a little bit, not to get too like we've gotten pretty deep pretty quickly, and that's totally fine. But I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit about the collegiate environment that you're playing in,
Okay.
um, because I feel
Sure.
like it must allow you to kind of obviously you're playing with much younger players, I would assume, for the most part on these teams, and you can probably like see a lot of characteristics that you might have recognized in yourself as a younger player in these players. So I'm just kind of curious, like, what's it like to see sort of like a young, inexperienced player from the outside, and like, are you able to mentor some of these players at this point? I know that being a 19 or 20-year-old guy competing who's pretty good at something, whether it's a game or whatever, it's pretty easy to be extremely egomaniacal about your own skills, and so it's hard to take advice from somebody else. But what's been your experience kind of like interacting with like the next generation of esports players, I guess?
Actually, they're very like they will all listen to criticism because I guess my background and everything. So
Mm-hmm.
it's been a good time, and I guess like for me, like when I first came here, like I had to like I go from like how does this not sound like toxic, but like like top pros, and then I like down to collegiate. The level of gameplay, just overall, is just like because it's only first developed, like it's only developing right now, collegiate.
Right.
So like there's schools who pick up like ascendant players, and there's just like immortal players, and like obviously it's not as competitive. So it's hard to. I mean, it is a lot of fun to mentor everyone, and I guess I'm trying my best to give advice whenever they want it. But I think mainly they're at learning a lot from just how I play. And if I set a high bar of like don't making not making like silly mistakes all the time, then they kind of just follow.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's very rewarding. I mean, that's kind of why I'm doing all this because
It's been rewarding to just kind of like kind of show maybe show people the way, not necessarily like teach them, but just kind of like try and be an example for these younger players.
yeah, like I try to like give them advice whenever they want, but I'm still like trying to figure out myself at the same time, and then the environment has been I don't know, it's been really rewarding. I mean, they ask me questions here and there, but like I haven't been really like coaching the team, I suppose, like
Yeah.
because I mean it's different because like I'm here for school, and I for now I'm just trying to like focus on my studies as much as I can while
Mm.
trying to like do the Valorant on the side. But I mean I guess I don't know how much I've actually helped them. I hope I have, but I think them just watching my gameplay, how I play, how I take fights, like they're learning from that. So it has been really rewarding.
Gotcha. Um, Slightly kind of in the same vein, I guess I'm curious from a player's perspective. So I guess I should also preface this by saying I have coached. I've coached traditional sports. I've coached esports. I coached in Dota 2 for a little bit. I coached coached Kitten Shelter, which is Roy's team, during like the last qualifier cycle.
I remember
Um,
that. No.
yeah, so I've done a bit of coaching myself, and obviously the relationship of coach to players is a little bit different than player to player. So I was curious from the player's perspective, what sort of advice do you have for like giving feedback and criticism to like to other players?
Okay, yeah, I mean that's a good topic. I mean that's like a really good topic because like for a while, like me not knowing how to like criticize each other, like you can easily, if you don't say it in the right way, like tilt your teammate, and then we go back to the flow state. Like if you're tilting your teammate, like he's gonna be playing down. So giving criticism, I've learned you shouldn't, like in game, just don't give criticism. Like it just unless it's like you don't really need to give criticism. Like you just go to the next round and say like what you need to do there. But like saying nitpicking stuff like you shouldn't have done this or shouldn't have done that, like it's not necessary. So the criticism in game, like I think you could just wait till after the game is the best
Sure.
way to do it.
But
But yeah,
what about like in a practice environment? Let's say you're doing VOD review afterwards, and there's like a certain type of play that is like losing you guys rounds. Like how would you bring that up, or would you just kind of like rely on the coach to be pointing that out? I know it's like a very
yeah,
delicate thing, especially in esports. I find, and to be honest, this is one of the reasons that I got into esports is because coming from a sports background, seeing what esports is like, and seeing how sort of like a lot of the players have gotten to the position that they're in without the background of having coaches and mentors and stuff like that. Whereas
yeah,
like I had coaches telling me what I was doing wrong since I was like 4 years old. But if you're an esports pro, a lot of times you just got there by just grinding the game and being really good, and so you don't necessarily have people sort of like correcting you, and you don't really get used to taking feedback a lot of the time. And so being able to communicate things that need to change to the benefit of the player and the team can be really difficult to get past that sort of like ego defense of somebody telling you that you're doing something wrong. So do you have any experience with that? Like is like how do you handle that, I guess, as a player?
okay. Well, so me personally, I'm not. I've never been that good with taking criticism, to be honest. And like, and I know how it feels to like get, especially like you have to like if it's a team, if it's like a strategy thing, like where a whole team is doing something wrong, like I think it's fine to point out. But if you're like if you did something dumb and then someone's like, oh, you shouldn't do that, like again, like it's kind of like that would trigger anybody. And I think a lot of people do that. So like, there's certain criticism you got to know that is acceptable, and you
Mm-hmm.
got to like put yourself in their shoes. Like if you do something that you obviously know like what you should have done later, you probably shouldn't point it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like because that there's no point. And actually we don't have a coach here right now. I think we're like getting a coach, but we would try to just talk about it after the game. But player to player, I just try to put myself in their shoes. And it's just like it has been a while um, where I used to give criticism, and every time I did, I would piss the person off every single time, and I would just eventually, like, I don't know, for some reason, I didn't like learn how to give it like better. Like, I think a lot of people just like, oh, why isn't that guy? Why can't he just take that criticism? Like, what he can that guy's not coachable or something. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but instead of thinking that again, like the victim, vic, like focus on yourself and so you change how you say things until like you don't actually because when I gave criticism, it came from a place of like kind of like I was kind of angry, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So people won't be able to take that kind of criticism. So I mean, criticism is delicate, but if you're like given it in a constructive way, I think it's always fine. But it's funny. Like I actually I'm only just starting to learn a lot of these like life skills, like just talking to other people like recently,
Sure.
and so yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I can remember from even just the last team that I coached where if you said something in a certain way, a lot of times it would cause like a negative spiral of like, okay, well, now the person's defensive and they're just trying to defend their position instead of actually learning from it. Whereas if you just are kind of like approaching it from a more holistic, hey, what if we did this instead? Because I think it might help us accomplish this better. Um, a lot of times, just how you frame what you're trying to say is like the entire difference between whether it actually makes a change positively or not.
Yeah, and I think I tweeted this out and I deleted it for some reason, but like I think a lot of teams would benefit of just getting like a communication expert specialist like on every single team just to listen how everyone's talking to each other. And also, like being on a team is like being in a relationship. Like you need to have strong communication with each other. And if you don't say everything that's on your mind and like stuff that bugs you, it just turns into like a frenzy of other problems. And so if you're scared of like saying stuff to other people, like it becomes issues like right away in teams.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of, I believe, why people like cut each other in team environments because like it's the whole NA thing, like, oh, that guy's playing bad, like cut him. But a lot of these issues like start in the team, and then the team gets divided, and nothing ever gets resolved because like it's just so easy to avoid confrontation when you're online. Like
Mm-hmm.
you just log off, like whatever, like you're this guy's been pissed the whole day, and then the crack's over and nothing gets discussed, and you bring that to the next prac, and that's how it starts. A lot of the problems in teams start with that. So I think they would benefit in getting some kind of communication coach because I mean we're all just hermit crab gamers that probably don't have the best social skills. Let's be honest. Like me, well, I'm speaking for myself, and I know a lot of people struggle giving proper feedback and criticism. So I think that would
That's
be
a really
beneficial.
interesting point. I never really thought about the fact that because it's online, you can kind of just do avoidance whenever there's problems. Whereas like if you're in a
Mhm.
team where you're like you have to travel back on the bus together for something like that from a basketball game at the end of the day that you just lost, you're gonna be there with the people that you're mad at, and eventually you're gonna figure it
Yeah,
out. But yeah, that makes a
yeah,
lot of sense.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say with like especially just being indoors all day and you log off your computer and then you're by yourself in a room, like
Mm-hmm.
and that like you're by yourself and then the thoughts just start to spiral out. So yeah, a lot of negativity can come from like just sitting in front of a computer in general and not really like having that face to face contact. And I think that's a lot. Like I've been like an overthinker since I was like a kid, and so like I think the isolation kind of like messes you with the overthinking. So yeah, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
important.
Did you have LAN experience in CSGO or Valorant? I can't remember whether you had any in
Uh,
Valorant.
uh, no, I never. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like I guess the COVID era too, but we
Oh,
never.
true, true.
But still, even if it wasn't COVID, I wouldn't have gone to land because only the top two teams will like go to land or like
Right.
so. But in Counter Strike, yeah, I mean, I went to the London major. But before I even did all that, I would actually travel to just local lands as many as I could. I drove like 9 hours to like
Mm-hmm.
Quebec from Toronto, or that's 6 hours, like in Philadelphia. So I try to get as much as possible. But yeah, Valorant, nope, nothing. That's why I didn't like Valorant as much as Counter Strike because in Counter Strike, even if you weren't the best, you still gotta travel the world and compete, and that's what makes this like worth it. That's what makes this job fun. And then Valorant, I just sat indoors playing 10 hours a day alone
Right.
and never
Yeah.
going
So
to LAN, and
you never had like a
it's
team
rough.
house experience with energy or anything like that either.
No, actually, we're planning on doing that, but the COVID scared some of the players, and they didn't
Mm.
want to do any of that, and understandably. But yeah, yeah, a lot of problems arrived on Energy because first of all, we didn't communicate properly with each other, and yeah, we weren't in person, and yeah, like, there's so many, and I was a part of the problem too. Like I didn't know how to like voice any of my concerns or like I'd
Mm-hmm.
show up to practice pissed off, and I just wouldn't say anything the whole time. So yeah, definitely was an issue.
So being that you did have some in-person experiences in Counter-Strike, would you say that there's like a massive difference between those experiences? Even like if you're losing in person, is it like a better experience because you're like part of a community at that point with people that you can actually see and interact with?
Yeah, I mean, you'll definitely act differently if you're in the room with other people. Like,
Right.
you can't get away with slamming your desk, and people can confront you if you're getting too frustrated. They see all your emotions, and you can't hide. And
Mm-hmm.
but being able to, which is huge, and I think that's why like teams like Loud are so good because they just hang out with each other all the time. I'm sure, and they like love each other, in a team house, you'll constantly be like hanging out, getting dinner and stuff, and so you're constantly like talking about the game, and then it's easier to like talk about like issues and so yeah, if you're online, you just log off, go talk to your girlfriend or whatever, go with your family or lay in your bed, watch YouTube videos instead of having that face to face contact, and it is much different, and yeah, actually, and complexity. Actually, like we did a boot camp in Europe, and that like made us so much better and like
Mhm.
allowed us to bond and a lot of those I think what separates like the good teams from like you got to be on the same page like one unit, and it's just so hard to do when you're online,
Right. Yeah.
especially no help from the orgs either, like trying to help with the communications. So.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, maybe you don't have the perfect answer for this, but I would still be really interested to hear your answer about like building a successful team culture. Like, what do you think it really takes to kind of make that one unit that you're looking for, at least get closer to it than just sort of like a collection of random people?
Well, I mean, like I said, like with the relationship, like if you're in a relationship, you got to communicate. You got to, because like you're not gonna agree on everything, so you got to find a system and a common ground with each other. And I think some coaches like I've had experience, like they kind of just take over the whole like what's gonna happen in the team, and I don't think that's like the right way. You got to like communicate to every single player. You got to have constant chats with each other, and really like just have one-on-one chats with everyone and ask them, hey, like how do you feel? Like, what's going on? Like, like truthfully, where it's no judgmental. You can say exactly how you feel, and then you just start to like piece all the problems that you think everyone has, and then because if you don't have that, then you just don't feel heard and you don't feel appreciated. And then, like I said, it just starts building up the resentment in each player, and eventually you get to a point where a player doesn't even care, he gets cut and whatever, like he just wants to leave the team. And problems like that can arise so fast. And just like a relationship, like you gotta have good communication with your significant other, and if you keep things that bother you, it's just gonna keep building and building and building, and you're gonna show up to prac like not wanting to be there. You're not gonna um yeah. So you're just like communicating, making sure everyone's on the same page. Um, I mean, just making sure everyone's heard, really. Like if hearing everyone's idea. And I don't know if anyone's ever seen it, but Ted Lasso. Have you ever seen that show?
I haven't, but I've heard it's good.
Uh, well, it's about like a coach who has nothing like his job is to coach a soccer team, but he's never coached a soccer team before ever, and
Uh,
he has no experience with it. But he makes the team better, not through coaching them through soccer, but improving the relationships of all the players
mhm.
and getting them like like almost like yeah, just like bonding them and like it's just creating such a positive environment for them, and that's how they became a lot better. And I think that's the way that good coaching and good communication, and that's why you see a lot of success in European teams, like Brazilian teams, because they're brothers and they live and breathe the game together. And NA doesn't have that. It's
Mhm.
really rare. It's very rare, very very rare to have a team like that who's all on the same page. Sadly,
Yeah, it's so interesting that it's really memed about in esports, the whole like power of friendship thing, but it is real. Like you
yeah,
need to be friends with your team for the most part. I mean, there are some people who can handle like treating it as a job where you just clock in and
yeah,
it's like I'm just going to do my job to the best of my abilities. But I feel like
yeah,
almost
yeah.
every single world champion in like any sport or esport, it's always the team that is like they like each other the most. Like,
I agree. I mean, you see it, and it's fascinating with like sports psychology. There's still a lot of teams without them for some
mhm,
reason. Um, there's I don't know if you've seen like Glaive from Astralis when they're in their prime. He said they wouldn't have won the major without a sports psychologist,
mhm,
and like and their Ascend when they won in Valorant. I forget which tournament that was, but they said without their psychologist or mental health coach or just anybody, like sometimes it's not even a psychologist, it's just someone there that the players can talk to without
yeah.
judgment. And they said without her, him, they wouldn't have won. And even with that information that they say, orgs are still aren't hiring them for some reason. And that's how like It's just wild to me. But I mean, I don't blame them for because some of them are like just really good at talking and they're not actually helpful.
Yeah.
So maybe they have bad experiences, but yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
it has to be the
I
right
agree.
fit for sure. And
Yeah.
yeah, another great example is in Dota 2, where this team OG, basically they like formed at the last minute, uh, because two of their teammates left to go join like a super team, and they had like their coach step in, and they basically just like became like a band of brothers, and they ended up winning the international. And then they came back the next year, and they had like a sports psychologist who worked with Astralis, I think, actually, and worked with them, and they won another international. So they won back to back internationals. And it's like they basically gave all their credit to their coach and all of their credit to their mental coach. And then still it seems to be this situation where it's like, no, I think the best coach is just like a former player who's friends with the players or something like that. It's very
Yeah.
strange in esports to see this happening. Where I look at every other pro sports thing, and it's like the best coaches are the ones who have like lived and breathed like relationship building and that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
but I don't know. I think I like to believe that we'll get there eventually. It's like I
Yeah.
think eventually people will see enough success and it will just become like undeniable that this is the correct way to build an environment. But who knows?
Well, yeah, I mean, you see it in every other sport. So, I mean, there's it's no different. I mean, that the whole game. I mean, everyone says like the game's like 60% mental and like 40% skill, but no one knows what that means. I guess I didn't. I
Right.
guess so. And like Tiger Woods, like I'm pretty sure he had a sports psychologist from when he was like 8 or something. Like he had his dad got him like a sports psych from an early age, and that's why like I did golf seems like the hardest sport. You like every all eyes are on you, and there's no like at least in my game, like if I make a mistake, I have 4 teammates to maybe bail me out, and then I have the next round too. Like golf, one mistake and like you look like your whole like score could be dropped or whatever. Like you
Yep.
won't win anymore. So dealing with the pressure of everyone just staring at you, like that's just fascinating. Like and and that's why like Tiger Woods was so like just didn't get phased by anything. And you need to actually, I believe, like kind of you got to be able to be kind of like that. Or if you get angry, I mean, Simple's a good example. Like Simple gets angry all the time, but I guess he just channel his like I don't know how he does it, but he channels it into skill somehow. And but Zaiwu is another example, and this guy I don't know if you ever seen his interview with Zaiwu, but I love his attitude because he's always just like, yeah, like he's the best player in the game, and he's just like, yeah, I just play, I just have fun. I don't know, like we lost, but no, we'll do better next time. And yeah, like he's just so like nonchalant about everything, and just I love that because that's like kind of like he's just having fun, and that's like the hardest thing to do actually in game, like any sport without
Yeah.
the pressure. You know?
It's also really interesting too because I feel like there's a lot of people that are a lot of sort of like figures that people look up to as like, oh, I want to be that type of competitor, right? You know, you've got like Michael Jordan, who essentially was just like enraged at everybody that he was playing against the entire time in his entire career.
That is true.
And to me, that seems like that would be impossible to play well if you're just angry at everything. But he's like the best player of all time. But then you also have players who are like Zaiwu or people who just seem to have fun with the game, and that's how they perform the best. So it's not like a one size fits all thing, but for sure there's like there's different ways to channel that into success. And I think to your
Yeah.
point though, at the end of the day, being phased by something long term is always going to hold you back. You have to be able to like let things go and reset to like be in the moment again.
Yeah, no, you brought a really good point. Yeah, everyone has their own way to um, channel how like yeah, I mean that's really interesting. I was really like an anxious person to begin with, and so I mean sometimes like it has nothing to do with the game. Like you need to like fix like or heal from like maybe some of the childhood things that happened or whatever. Like yeah, like you got to work on yourself, and that's something like that's kind of like the message I want to like send the most is you can obsess over the game, but like, you got to like think about yourself and then and in turn that will like make you a better player. So like yeah, definitely I think that's something everyone should look into.
Awesome. Well, honestly, I had like a couple other questions, but I feel like that's like the perfect way to end this conversation. It's just like I was going to ask you what your advice to your younger self would be, and that's basically what it is, right? It's just
Yeah,
focus on
my younger
yourself.
self. Oh man, just stop being so hard on yourself, man. Everyone's been telling me that my whole life. Like you said, my parents tell me every day, you're too hard on yourself. I'm like, what does that mean? What? But like now I have the frame of mind, like, hey, if I'm too hard on myself, I'm gonna play worse. Yeah. So it's you frame it in a different way, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing me on here.
Yeah, I think it was a great conversation. Hopefully, it was helpful to some people. I guess one last thing I do want to ask you is like, where should people follow you, or do you have anything specifically going on in 2023 that you want to promote, or anything like that?
Well, I mean, my Twitter is Android FPS. If you, I tweet out some of my experiences. Like, I just tweet out that I'm gonna try out a cognitive, uh, behavioral therapy because that kind of specializes in changing like negative thinking and changing your thoughts to positive. I think that's important. So, I mean, I'll keep updates with that, how that goes. And other than that, like, I'm just trying to like learn more about myself, and I think I'll start coaching eventually, I think so. Maybe keep an eye out on that. So, but that's it. Yeah,
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for being an open book and sharing your experience with everybody. I think you're on the right path, and I think you'd make a pretty good coach with all of your experience and self discovery. So I
yeah. It's
appreciate you.
funny. A couple like 6 months ago, I would have been terrified to come. I wouldn't even come on here. So I know, but yeah, I guess yeah, you can change. So I mean, I'm happy with this.
Awesome.